Nathan never considered himself the jealous type. In their 12 years of marriage, Olivia had always been free-spirited, passionate about new hobbies and eager to explore new interests. So, when she suddenly developed an obsession with wine tastings, he had no reason to doubt her. At first he found it amusing. She had never been much of a wine connoisseur before, preferring simple cocktails over aged vintages, but now she spoke about tannins and terroirs with the enthusiasm of a sommelier. Their home, however, remained devoid of any evidence of her supposed passion. No bottles, no brochures, not even a lingering scent of wine on her breath when she returned from her outings. That was the first crack in the illusion. Nathan's curiosity turned to unease when Olivia's schedule became increasingly erratic. She had always been punctual, almost to a fault, yet these tastings often ran late, sometimes past midnight. "Some of these events are private," she explained one evening, slipping out of her heels. "They don't follow strict hours like a restaurant or bar." That explanation might have been enough if not for the way she avoided his gaze as she spoke. One night, he waited up for her, pretending to be asleep when she finally crept into their bedroom at nearly 1 a.m. He noticed the faintest trace of cologne clinging to her dress, one that wasn't his. It wasn't the scent of wine either. That was when he knew something was off. Nathan decided to test the waters. Over dinner the next night, he casually asked, "You always talk about these amazing wines, but you never bring any home. What was that one you raved about last week?" Olivia barely hesitated. "The 2012 Chateau Margaux," she said smoothly. "Incredible body, just the right amount of oak. I could have brought a bottle, but it was too expensive." Nathan nodded as if satisfied, but his fingers tightened around his fork. Chateau Margaux was world famous. He had just read an article mentioning a single bottle could cost thousands. He doubted the small exclusive tastings she described were handing out samples of one of the rarest wines in the world. His unease deepened. It was no longer just suspicion, it was certainty. That's when he decided to follow her. Nathan had always believed that trust was the cornerstone of any strong relationship. Yet as he sat alone in his car outside their house, watching Olivia step into an Uber, dressed in a deep red dress he'd never seen before, he realized trust had an expiration date. And tonight, his had run out. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel as he tailed her discreetly through the city streets. The car weaved past familiar landmarks, the bakery where they used to buy croissants on lazy Sunday mornings, the bookstore where he had once surprised her with a first edition of her favorite novel. It struck him then how memories could turn into ghosts, lingering in places that no longer held the same warmth. The Uber eventually stopped in front of an upscale event venue, its entrance illuminated by golden lighting. Olivia stepped out, adjusted her dress, and walked inside without a second glance. Nathan parked a short distance away, took a deep breath, and approached the building with calculated steps. Inside, chandeliers glowed softly above polished marble floors. The air was rich with the scent of wine, aged oak, and expensive perfume. Servers moved seamlessly between clusters of well-dressed guests, pouring deep ruby liquid into delicate glasses. Nathan scanned the room, looking for her. His stomach tightened. No sign of Olivia. He approached a woman at the check-in desk. "Excuse me, I believe my wife is attending this event. Olivia Carter." The woman frowned slightly and ran a manicured finger down the guest list. After a moment, she shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see that name here." Nathan felt something shift inside him, an undeniable confirmation of what he already feared. But still, he wasn't ready to jump to conclusions. Not yet. Keeping his composure, he pulled out his phone and quickly checked her location through the tracking app they'd installed on each other's devices years ago for safety. He watched as the blinking dot moved away from the venue. His pulse spiked. If she wasn't here, where was she? Quickly exiting the venue, he followed the signal, his heart pounding harder with every turn. The drive took him to a different part of town, away from the grandeur of wine tastings and into something far more ordinary. When he pulled up in front of a dimly lit bar, the neon sign flickering above the entrance, he already knew what he was about to find. Nathan stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of whiskey and something more intimate. A low hum of conversation, laughter that held no pretense. His eyes scanned the room, moving past worn leather booths and a bartender wiping down the counter. Then he saw her. Olivia was seated at a secluded table in the corner, her fingers delicately resting atop another man's hand. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. The man, Adrian, leaned in, his voice low, his expression full of the easy confidence of someone who had already won. He was effortlessly polished, the kind of man who knew exactly how to make someone feel special. And Olivia. She was smiling, her head tilting slightly as she listened, the way she used to when they were first in love. Nathan clenched his jaw. He could have walked away, could have convinced himself he had seen enough, but he wasn't the kind of man to let the truth linger in the shadows. He took a step forward. Adrian must have sensed something because he lifted his head just as Nathan reached the table. For a split second, Olivia didn't notice. She was too focused on Adrian, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her wine glass. Then her gaze flickered up and froze. Nathan, his name left her lips in a breathless whisper, like she had just seen a ghost. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. "Nice place for a wine tasting," Nathan said finally, his voice calm, too calm. Olivia's face drained of color. Adrian, to his credit, barely reacted. He leaned back in his seat, regarding Nathan with quiet curiosity, as if evaluating whether this was a situation that required damage control or indifference. Nathan pulled out a chair and sat down across from them, placing his hands on the table with deliberate ease. "I have to say, Olivia, when you said you were developing a passion for wine, I didn't realize it came with hands-on tutoring." His gaze flickered to Adrian's, his expression unreadable. Olivia swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. "Nathan, this isn't—" "Don't!" His voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't insult me by lying. Not now." A slow breath left Olivia's lips, and for a moment she looked almost relieved, as if she had grown tired of pretending. Adrian cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "Nathan, is it?" His voice was smooth, practiced. "I don't think this is the time or place for—" "Shut up," Nathan said quietly. Adrian blinked, caught off guard by the sheer finality of the words. Nathan turned back to Olivia, his expression unreadable. "How long?" She hesitated. "How long?" Her lips parted, then closed. She looked down at her glass, swirling the wine as if searching for an answer within it. Finally, she exhaled. 6 months. Nathan felt something crack inside him. Not shatter, just crack. A fracture in something he thought had been solid. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to something just above a whisper. "You could have told me." Olivia's eyes snapped up to his. "You could have just said you weren't happy," he continued, his voice steady. "Instead you fed me stories about exclusive tastings and rare vintages, thinking I'd never notice." Her eyes glistened with something, guilt, maybe. But it didn't matter anymore. Nathan stood up, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. "Enjoy your wine, Olivia?" He glanced at Adrian, his lip curling slightly. "I hope it's worth it." With that, he turned and walked away, stepping out into the cool night air. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. He had seen enough, and now it was time for the fallout. Nathan's steps felt heavier as he left the bar, but his mind was unnervingly clear. There was no more uncertainty, no more need for excuses. The truth had finally revealed itself, raw and undeniable. Olivia had lied to him for 6 months, slipping away under the guise of sophistication, using the allure of wine tastings to mask the bitterness of betrayal. And Adrian, the polished sommelier who likely prided himself on the subtleties of taste, had made the grave mistake of underestimating the man who had just walked away. The night air was crisp, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city, a passing car, muffled laughter from a group across the street, the faint hum of a song playing somewhere nearby. Nathan inhaled deeply, rolling his shoulders, shaking off the weight pressing against his chest. He could feel the sting of it, the slow burn of realization settling into his bones, but he refused to let it consume him. No, if Olivier had spent months perfecting her deception, he would spend the next few moments crafting something far more devastating, an exit she would never forget. His fingers hovered over his phone for a second before he made his choice. He wasn't going to text her, wasn't going to give her the courtesy of an argument over the phone. Instead, he dialed a number he never thought he'd have to use. His best friend, Mark. "Hey, Nate, what's up?" Mark's voice was light, oblivious. Nathan could hear the sound of a game playing in the background, the easy atmosphere of a man enjoying his evening. For a brief second, He envied that normalcy. "I need a favor," Nathan said, his tone even. "Are you home?" There was a slight pause before Mark answered, his tone shifting. "Yeah. What's going on? I'll explain when I get there." Nathan ended the call and got into his car. The drive to Mark's place took less than 15 minutes, but it felt longer with the way his mind churned, cycling through every moment of deception, every excuse Olivia had fed him. By the time he pulled up to the curb outside Mark's house, his hands had relaxed on the steering wheel. The initial wave of anger had dulled into something sharper, something calculated. Mark was already at the door when Nathan stepped out. He took one look at him, his slightly disheveled hair, the tension in his shoulders, the unusual calm in his expression, and stepped aside without question. "Come in." The moment Nathan was inside, he exhaled and turned to face Mark, who leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "All right," Mark said. "What the hell happened?" Nathan told him everything. He laid it out plainly. Olivia's sudden love for wine, her repeated absences, the bar, Adrian. Mark didn't interrupt, but Nathan could see his friend's expression darken with every detail. By the time he finished, Mark let out a low whistle. "Damn," he muttered, shaking his head. "I can't believe it. Olivia, of all people." Nathan let out a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, funny how that works." Mark was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What are you going to do?" Nathan already had his answer. "I'm not going to give her the satisfaction of a messy breakup. No screaming match, no desperate attempts to fix what's already broken. She spent 6 months thinking she's outsmarted me." His jaw tightened slightly. "I'm going to remind her exactly who she's been underestimating." Mark eyed him warily. "You're not going to do anything stupid, are you?" Nathan shook his head. "No, just making sure the truth gets out." He met Mark's gaze. "You still have that contact at the tasting room?" Mark hesitated. "The magazine?" Nathan nodded. Mark sighed. "Yeah, I know a guy." "Why?" Nathan leaned forward slightly. "I want you to tip them off about Adrian. Make sure they know he's been using his expertise for more than just wine. That should stir the pot a little." Mark smirked. "Petty. I like it." Then he hesitated. "And Olivia?" Nathan exhaled slowly. "I'll take care of that myself." By the time Nathan arrived home, the house felt different. It wasn't the same place he had built with Olivia, filled with laughter and shared secrets. It was just a structure now, walls containing the echoes of something that had already died. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with quiet finality. He didn't waste time. He moved through the house with a sense of purpose, gathering Olivia's things, her clothes, her jewelry, the little trinkets she had scattered around as if marking her territory. Every carefully chosen piece that she had thought belonged here, he packed away. When he reached their bedroom, he paused for only a second before pulling her suitcase from the closet and filling it methodically. By the time he was done, there was nothing left of her in their home. Nathan sat on the couch, his phone resting in his palm. He scrolled through his messages, found Olivia's name, and began typing. "Nathan, I know everything. I packed your things. Come get them tomorrow." He stared at the screen for a second before hitting send. Seconds later, the 3 dots appeared. She was typing. "Olivia, Nathan, please. Can we talk?" Nathan smiled to himself, but there was no warmth in it. "Nathan, there's nothing to talk about." He stood, stretched his shoulders, and walked to the window. The city lights glowed outside, indifferent to his turmoil. Tomorrow, Olivia would come home expecting damage control, expecting pleas, maybe even an argument she could spin in her favor. But all she would find was a suitcase and a locked door. And as for Adrian, by the time the magazine got the tip, his career would take a hit. Nathan wasn't a man who enjoyed revenge, but he did believe in consequences. Olivier arrived at the house the next afternoon, right on schedule, as if she had been expecting a controlled conversation, a chance to soften the damage, to use the same charming, calculated words she had likely used on Adrian to convince him that their secret was safe. Nathan, however, had no intention of giving her that opportunity. He had spent the night in a strange state of clarity, one that did not come with rage or sadness, but with the simple acceptance that the life he thought he had been living was nothing more than a well-crafted illusion. When he heard her car pull into the driveway, he didn't move from where he sat in the living room. He simply watched as she stepped out, her expression wary, but not nearly as panicked as it should have been. That alone confirmed what he had suspected. She thought she could control this, that she could manage the fallout, manipulate the narrative. When she knocked, he didn't answer right away. He let her wait, let her stand outside for a full 30 seconds before he finally rose from the couch and unlocked the door. He pulled it open just enough to meet her eyes, keeping himself in the doorway so she couldn't step inside as she normally would. Olivia's gaze flickered past him into the house, taking in the emptiness, the absence of her things. Nathan saw the exact moment she registered what he had done. Her breath caught slightly, her throat moving as she swallowed, but she recovered quickly. She always did. "Nathan," she started, her voice smooth, practiced, the voice of a woman who had talked her way out of difficult situations before. "Please, let's talk about this. I know you're angry, I know how this looks, but—" He exhaled sharply, cutting her off with nothing more than a quiet laugh. "Olivia, don't insult me." His voice was steady, almost detached. He saw the way her fingers curled slightly at her sides, as if she had expected a different reaction, something volatile, something she could work with. But he wasn't giving her that. "Your things are packed." He stepped aside, revealing the neatly stacked suitcases by the door. "Take them and go." Her lips parted slightly, the first real crack in her composure appearing. "Nathan, come on. Can we not do this like strangers? I owe you an explanation." "No, you don't," he said simply, his expression unreadable. "You owed me honesty." "That's different." She flinched, just barely, and he wondered if those words had finally landed, if they had managed to slip past the carefully constructed walls she had built around herself. But she didn't break down. She didn't cry. She just stared at him for a long moment, as if searching for something, some sign that there was still room for negotiation. "Nathan, I never wanted to hurt you," she finally said, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. "I don't even know how it got this far. He shook his head, cutting her off again. "Don't," he said, his voice firm. "Don't stand here and act like this was something that just happened. You made choices, Olivia. Over and over again, for 6 months, you made the choice to lie to me. So no, you don't get to stand here and tell me you never meant to hurt me. Because you did. You just thought you'd never get caught." Her eyes shimmered slightly, and for a brief moment Nathan almost believed it, almost let himself think that maybe, deep down, she felt some kind of genuine remorse. But then she blinked, and just like that, the moment was gone, replaced by something else. Something more calculated. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, tilting her head just slightly, a move he recognized. It was the same way she looked at him when she wanted something, when she was trying to steer a conversation in her favor. "We can figure this out." Nathan let out a breath, then turned, walking to the small table by the door where a single envelope sat. He picked it up and held it out to her. "I already did." She hesitated before reaching for it, unfolding the papers inside. As her eyes scanned the document, her breath caught. "Divorce papers?" Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. He nodded. "I had them drawn up last night." She shook her head, disbelieving. "Nathan, we don't have to—" "Yes, we do," he interrupted. "You were never going to leave me, not really. You were going to keep this up until it stopped being exciting, until you either got bored or got caught. I'm just making the decision for you." For the first time, real panic flickered across her face. "But this is our life." "You don't just throw away 12 years, Nathan." He let out another short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You already did." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. He could see the war in her eyes, the frantic calculations, the attempts to find a way out, a way to salvage whatever control she thought she had, but there was nothing left to save. Finally, she exhaled shakily, nodding as if accepting her fate. "And Adrienne?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan smirked. Don't worry about him, he's got his own problems now." She frowned slightly, confused, but he didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. By now, word would have already started spreading through Adrian's professional circles. Nathan had made sure of that. It wouldn't be long before his little secret escapades became public knowledge, tarnishing the perfect reputation he had worked so hard to build. Olivia took a deep breath, then straightened her shoulders, steeling herself. "Fine," she said, her voice devoid of emotion now. "If this is what you want." Nathan met her gaze, his expression calm. "It's what I deserve." She swallowed, then nodded once. Without another word, she turned and grabbed the handles of her suitcases. Nathan didn't watch her go. He didn't need to. The moment the door shut behind her, something inside him loosened. Something that had been wound too tight for too long. He walked back into the house, his house now, feeling lighter than he had in months. There would still be pain, still be anger and grief over the life he thought he had, but there was also relief, because now, at least, the lies were over. And for the first time in a long time, he could breathe.